Welcome to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, brought to you by Claire Harbour
and Antoine Tirard. We're passionate about helping everyone find fulfillment in their work life.
We believe that big, messy, uncharted career changes are inevitable, and it's up to you to decide.
Will you take control and disrupt, or allow yourself to be disrupted?
We wrote the book about it, and now we share here our conversations with other thinkers in this crucial area.
Settle down and get ready to listen to this dose of wisdom.
So, in this episode of the Disrupt Your Career podcast, I am delighted to be meeting with Naeema Pasha, whom we've known for years. She's a longtime ally of our work. And she loves to look at work, at workers and workplaces, and the impact of technology, Gen Z, equity, diversity, and inclusion, all core to building AI, especially for the future of work. And also, she's a great fan of influencing and shaping strategy, delivering research projects and designing programs to progress successful diversity integration into business outcomes. Naeema, it's a real pleasure to have you here with me today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted, Claire. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's start as we always do with your career journey. You've been through many pivots and challenges in your career, which has covered pretty much every aspect of careers work, academia. You have a PhD in skilling for the future of work. And by the way, you started out with a degree in food technology, so we definitely want to understand a bit about what that shift happened for. And you also have just been constantly developing and diversifying your work forever and ever. I imagine that when we speak in 5 years, you'll be doing yet something different. But please tell us how this extraordinary career unfolded, what roles design and serendipity have played, and what you're most proud of, and what's been the most difficult.
Thank you for that. And thank you for delving into this topic. I hope that by just talking about my own experiences, people go, yes, that's been of interest to me, and I can see that reflecting. So I kind of think when you ask about design and serendipity, they go together. People who are fans of career theory will know about this thing called planned happenstance, I think developed by a peasant called Krumboltz back in the day. But he talks about that actually we have an idea shaped by who we are, our psychology, our upbringing, our culture and things. And that kind of predisposes us to some extent of what we want to do. And then we make plans that we want to do something related to that. And then things get in the way. Unexpected things. So in terms of my own career, I kind of grew up in a South Asian household, and education was really important and to do well. And I felt I needed to do sciences. So that's why I did food science, because I thought that would be pleasing to family and friends if I said I wanted to do something like study urban dance or something that would have been not approved of, even though perhaps I would have loved that deep down. So I went to university to do food science, and I really liked the science, but what I was drawn to more was the psychology, because we had this really good modules on consumer psychology, and I kind of was really kind of swept away with thinking, so that's why they put chocolates in that order when you go to a shop. Oh, see, that's why they make store layouts the way they do, because it's kind of tapping into how we think and what we think, and leaping forward a little bit in terms of artificial intelligence that we're all talking about now, is that online shopping is set up in a particular way. It's also leading you in particular things. You go into, you looking up something, or you go somewhere, then suddenly your Instagram is flooded with, I just looked at, I don't know, diamond rings. I don't know why that came to my mind.
Whoa.
Yeah, why not? Let's go with something like that, or pot noodle, whatever it could be. So I found I was really interested in that side of it more, although I did love the food science. And anybody who's interested and still eats Jaffa cakes, my final year project was to do the psychology behind why we produce the packaging and put there. But because I had to do the science as well, we had these big industrial kitchens in the university. And so I had to recreate Jaffa cakes. So that was what I did.
A shame we didn't know each other then. One of my favorite clients of all time works for the company that makes Jaffa cakes. And another client from the same company is actually head of innovation and research. So she could have helped you or not.
Yeah. Wow.
But we digress.
Funny. Full circle coming on that. So then kind of the focus on people and how they make decisions, why they make decisions, I think is probably going to be the thread through our conversation, because that's career decisions, relationship decisions, and biscuit decisions as well. That all these things are part of who we are and how we see ourselves and our identity.
All right. So, in all these different contexts in which you've worked, you must have worked across obviously a range of contexts and also with a number of probably rather contrasting styles of leadership. I'm wondering what sort of lessons you've learned from those leaders or those contexts that has really stuck with you and got some relevance either within the world of careers and future of work or beyond.
When I started working, so the launch pad of Jaffa Cakes got me into thinking about people and how they think and how they make choices such as careers. So I went into recruitment, then I went into working as a recruiter, then I went into career development. And I was very naive, Claire, at the beginning. I thought what you had to do for people to progress is that we have to enable people to understand their skills, enable people to feel confident in their abilities, look at what's happening. So if Jaffa Cake were recruiting, I forget who owns Jaffa Cake. Let's go. I don't know. Anyway,
It's now called Pladis. It used to be called United Biscuits.
United Biscuits. Okay, well, let's say you're going to a biscuit manufacturer. You're thinking, well, what are they looking for? They're going to say something like, you've got to be innovative, you've got to be a team player, you've got to blah, blah, blah. And then you put all those examples in and voila, if you do well, you'll come through. But what I found, and this relates to leadership, is I was naive then thinking that's how you do well, you do good, and you speak well and you don't get there. Because of the complexities of the environment of work and how society sees people and how we see ourselves, and also because of layering that in around leadership as well, things aren't straightforward in that way. So I've seen a range of really, as we all have, really positive, empowering leaders. And I've also seen very toxic leaders and difficult leadership styles. And I have found, and myself working in different industries as well, they are in all industries, all cultures across the world where you have this range of different things. But what I found, if I can be honest, I'm sure you want me to, I found more recently in technology firms, and I've written about this, is why I think I can be honest, is that there seems to be greater difficulty in leadership styles. And it reminds me of perhaps the days gone by in finance industry. Leaders are and an organization culture is very focused on output, which obviously finance tech or firms are, but to the extent that they kind of minimize the experience of employees and to extent customers and other stakeholders, then you just create a very difficult environment. And I found that in tech, and that affects products. And that's one of the things you mentioned at the beginning about diversity and so on. When we're looking at AI in recruitment, the people who are interested in careers will be in that area. I see there are kind of leaders thinking, well, we have to behave in this way. We've got to get Q2 figures going well, or, we've got to increase our market share. And they're important things, but the idea is that you do it in a particular way that makes people feel uncomfortable, difficult, because that's the way it should be done. It's almost an idea of this is how you do things. I still find it quite challenging. And I think, that's the thing I kind of want to also devote some of my work to, is to see how we can even out some of that kind of behavior in organizations as well.
Good to hear the idealist and the rebel coming out in you. Very important. You've made all these different moves, starting out from food and ending up writing a book and doing many things in between. Lots of disruption, lots of big changes. Talk us through what it's been like. Maybe the biggest change, the one that you found most challenging in terms of identity or context or structure or anything like that.
I have been thinking about this a lot, and it was quite easy to come up with. It just kind of like floated up to the top quite quickly. Actually, when I had this amazing job where I was looking at enabling people to take their careers forward and understand how they can move forward and progress, and that's from undergrads through to senior managers, and I really enjoyed this. And as I said, understanding more about actually you can do all the kind of things that you want to do with that person, but as I say, organizations, leadership, society can hold people back. And then there's this whole things about technology and skills change and all that kind of thing. So I realized there's so much more to it. And that kind of led me to wanting to do the book as well. But what I found through that was the aspect of diversity, which is still quite complex to discuss because people get quite upset about it. But I was appointed to be Director of Equity and Diversity and Inclusion. and started this, I thought would be great. And I thought people go, wow, this is lovely. We all want fairness at work. We all want people to do well. This is what we're committed to. I wasn't going into a place where perhaps people were really resistant to it. Or so I thought. That by far was the hardest thing I've ever done. The anger that people had for me doing that, the resistance and extraordinary experiences. And then it was hard to make that change. And I realized the only way I could make that change is for people to talk about their own experience at a university. So we had professors who were Black professors talking to other people in the, setting up these kind of conversations where people talk about their experiences. And the dean and senior managers who white males were kind of like, really kind of like, this happens with our staff. So we had, people saying if they came on campus, security would stop them, search their bags. And they were professors. They had female staff saying, going to an academic meeting, not given the academic jobs that, the projects to progress them forward, do much more things which look after the student, more kind of nurturing empathy kind of projects, which weren't going to take people forward. Harassment, bullying, all the whole kind of things. So when people heard that, then things started to shift. Actually, it was kind of shocking for them to hear that their staff were being stopped regularly by security, for example, at professor level, and they had just got on with it. Also hearing through the pandemic, for example, how Chinese students were targeted. They were having marks put on their door to say something like, you've got germs or something like this, the abuse that they had on the bus and all this. So just hearing that. So that was difficult, but also so important. And I think one of my, you asked me about, key moments of pride or achievement. I led a research project on race equity in UK businesses. So it wasn't about university, it was about UK businesses, looked at the FTSE 300, was UK based, but because they were a big business, they were global concerns as well from different industries. And that report came out, it went everywhere. People really responded to it. I was interviewed a lot in the news, but also the Bank of England and Governor Andrew Bailey wrote about it and said, this is influencing the Bank of England's strategy on equity and diversity. And they changed their strategy. And he wrote a piece in The Guardian on it. So that was my big achievement. I don't know if I'm going to ever replicate that again, but really profound for me because I felt this is making such a difference, even though the journey to get there was painful.
Congratulations. That's a beautiful achievement. And I suspect that on that particular dimension, you don't need to replicate it anyway because it's still there. And presumably the waves continue to cascade out and have their effect. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And yes, there's lots of stuff on there that let me just tell you briefly. This is UK based, but I think it's similar for other countries that we found when we look at educational, there was like twice as many white students get first than Black students, and that's UK only. You have to look at that data and can't dismiss it as say, well, Black students aren't as bright or they're not fixed for uni. We have to look at the system. But that was an aside. But just to finish on that, what I really felt strongly about was to do a research project that was a business case for equity rather than a social justice piece, which obviously we all feel that we want fairness and people to do well, regardless of their gender or their race or their religion and so on. But a business argument was really important to me. And the main finding from that was that those organizations that paid attention to their race equity had a increased value revenue, 58%. So it was massive.
Of course. I mean, people don't like to be preached at about the virtues of inclusion, but once they get it, they love the idea that diversity as a strategy brings more value because it's not just about how people look, it's about how they think, how they contribute, how their experience in life affects decisions, products, the whole thing. Of course, we're preaching to the choir, to each other. It is fascinating how resistant people are when they think it's preaching.
That was one of the things that was really important to me that on that strategy, we talk about why it was a particular challenge was, forgive me for HR people listening, I didn't want to go with an HR approach to it. So you'd have a on imposter syndrome or this or that or anything. I didn't want people to feel preached at, and I didn't want people to feel guilty because I didn't want them to think, well, words like privilege or fragility, those are the words I don't want these in. It's not nice because individually, everyone, as you just say, everyone's got, you can say, well, somebody who's a Black woman who's poorer, for example, will have a harder time. But then individually, if there's a white male senior leader, they're just having a hard time in life. Illness, finance, all those things. we all have our own journey as well. So I wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. That's great. Now, we've just talked about one way in which you made a massive impact. Another is that you've just had a book published. It's called Futureproof Your Career. And of course, we'll include links to it in the notes. What was your motivation to write a book? Obviously, you've written many academic papers, could have contented yourself with that. What sort of need are you trying to address with it? And what was your process for writing?
Futureproof Your Career, because I co-wrote it with a colleague of mine, Shahina Janjuhajiraj, who's also at Henley. Now she's moved on to HSA. So we both left our little home in Henley. We wanted to do something that was impactful around enabling people to understand how to make career decisions and think about the kind of things. I also, as you said, did a doctorate as well. And the research in that, I wanted a little channel for it to go through. And one of the things I really looked at is how we manage change. I think I'm attracted to things, there's a psychology, we're attracted to things we're trying to understand in ourselves. I was thinking, man, all this change is going on in me. What's it all about? How do we manage change? So that was part of it. So the motivation was to get the research out and actually do it in a way that's readable and accessible for people. And I just gave a talk last week to a firm, big energy firm, with their senior leadership team, and they actually had it to read and they quizzed me about it and they found it really useful. And I say that because of one of the motivations to write it was to enable people who were early, few years out of uni, going up into the sort of leadership roles. That was kind of who we thought about. So I'm really happy that it's actually got enough in there for people who are in senior leadership teams of large corporations. Well, there's enough in there, people going, this is interesting. And the process for writing it, both of us had COVID at several times through the thing. We had difficult times sort of getting it through because we were both quite poorly with it. And the process was just to have a similar thing, what you and I are doing now, is to have conversations, but we used to block these conversations into chapters to look at particular themes that we wanted to do, record that using AI tool, and then from that, pick out the key things that came through. So we used AI, and the book has got a lot of AI in it, to really help this process actually to get to the key words. So I think that's one of the good uses of AI that's out there.
Very interesting and wonderful that you were able to make such good use of it. Now, in the book, there's quite a lot of scholarly reflection and a lot of practical advice. If you were to boil down the main ideas of the book into a dummy's guide over a minute or two, what would you tell us?
One of the things around the book is around technology coming in, but that fits into all the other kind of changes that we're having. What we talked about right at the beginning is that it can feel like change comes slow. The whole thing changes slow and then it's fast. We talk about the waves, the sea coming in and you're kind of lapping around you and you're not realizing there's the changing world around you. Then suddenly, wham, you're up to your shoulders in the water. So that's one of the things that we said, is to kind of really consider every now and again the changes that are going on and think how we might adapt. What is the core thing around it? The main idea is I think it's really about managing change, I think, and that's the research I've got. So I followed a group of people in my studies to look at how well they managed change and how well that translated into career success as defined by the kind of job satisfaction, career, salary, all those kind of things. And it was people who could manage change that were more effective, had better resilience at things. And some of the things that I think listeners would be really interested in is I found that people who have higher career self-resilience, self-reliance were more able to. So those of us, and I think you're a great advocate of this, when you believe that you can do something, there's a Latin saying, qui vo per, I think. Anyway, to say when you believe you can, you're more able to do that. Now, that's kind of straightforward and standard. But in order to believe you can, there's probably processes and thoughts and colleagues and mentors and people that can enable you to start unpacking why you should believe in yourself, because it's people who perhaps are held back because of various things that's harder. So career self-reliance is really critical. And another one was being open to new ideas, open to experience. As a personality tool, I looked at a Big Five, and open to experience came through really easily. So that comes back to when you said about serendipity and planning, that sometimes we'll have a plan and we should have a plan. Actually, I did find those people who did have a plan also were more successful, but they had to adapt that plan. I mean, it hopefully sounds like common sense when we look back at it and you go, well, of course, that makes complete sense. But to see the data on it so strong to show that people who did that ended up, more successful because they could have that focus, be self-reliant, analyze what's going on around them, and then be open to change as it comes. So when new opportunities come up, moving to another continent, for example, you think, well, what does this mean to me? How could it do? But sometimes when you go into times when you think, oh, I'm not sure I've got that confidence or that ability, you can shut down those particular opportunities. So that would be what I'd like to say in your podcast, Claire, is what I think is really important. And I'm really pleased to have done the research on that.
Wonderful. That is very encouraging in many respects. You coined the term meta-skilling in the book as an approach for success at leadership team level as well as elsewhere. And I guess it's a mix of your areas of passion and expertise, which include the business philosophy side, leadership development, and behavioral sciences. For those who are thinking very concretely about what do I do next, or how do I get out of this career mess, or whatever it might be, are you able to share some tips that have some relationship with this notion of meta-skilling?
Yeah, so meta-skilling I looked at was this kind of things I talked about, these qualities and skills and abilities that we have. There's sort of three layers. The first one is sort of the technical skills. Listeners may have heard of something called T-shaped leadership. I forget, there's Harvard Business School have done a good review on this. But a T-shaped leader where the line of the T is our technical expertise. So it's not to neglect that. Sometimes we get wrapped up in some learning development. It's all about personal strengths and things. So that comes in the CrossFit of the T. But yeah, pay attention to your technical abilities and where you are, if you're whatever field you are or whatever field you want to move into, and think what those particular skills are, particular things that you need. If you want to move into tech, then it's the technical skills, or HR, all those kind of things. So those are important. So I had those as the base, actually, of understanding how we move around. So it's kind of a practical, solid kind of thing. And the next thing were these other skills, the T kind of thing. But I found the things I found in my research being adaptability, analytical skills, having this self-reliance. Those were really important. So it's examining those and on a practical basis. And it's in the book saying, actually, it's good to do things. I would say this, but having somebody to either a coach or a colleague or a friend, or even yourself to take time out and write these things out and look at, well, where do I draw on when I go through difficulties? And I do this with groups, and it's been quite profound when I do. I ask people to think of a difficult time you've been through, challenging time, and go through that and think, well, what were the strengths that pulled you through or enabled you to work through this or get where you want? So people, when they focus on that, it's their unique set of skills that they can take forward, and not to minimize, oh, it's fine, I just got on with it. Well, actually, you've done something there and it should be acknowledged. And the final thing, actually, on meta-skilling, we looked at it, it's about activism. So that can come in different ways. We can talk about it in terms of, right, I want to do things at work to progress my area and be quite active and say this is something progressive. But on a more basic level, it's about identity. What do you feel that this is almost a hill I could die on, that kind of thing. What is important to me? What would I put on my placard? I'm a person that wants to, I think, like with you, to make an impact, perhaps a meaningful impact. These are the kind of things that I think this is important. When you're able to incorporate that in to either your life or in your career itself, those are things. So I've talked about activism, and we see that more and more with organizations as well, saying, well, we want to have our approach to sustainability or whatever it is, this is an active role. Be more active. And I think when you're able to do that in the workplace and find an avenue for your activism, it will enable you to feel more motivated and passionate. And if you feel that is blocked, minimized, maybe even ridiculed, why do you want to climate? That's not what we're about, or we're not about this, or whatever. Then that's the difficult one, because that really relates back to what people call a lot now, values. I know you see value statements everywhere. That's what I see it as, that kind of our own activism to be who we want to be and do the kind of things that we want to do, the impact that we want to make in the world.
I love that. Thank you for making that so important and feature in your book. It really is crucial work for humanity. Let's go back to you. Let's go back to you when you were 18 years old. If you could talk to 18-year-old Naeema, what would you want to tell her?
I was thinking, actually, I've done all this work. So I've got my doctorate, she said, and I also did a couple of masters, both in career-related areas and people things. I think all I'm trying to do is to be curious, to solve things. And they were solving things for me. I think that's ultimately why I was doing this. And I think the findings, this is really odd. But the findings I had do relate to me. So if I, at 18, had a bit more of that career self-reliance that believed in, my abilities to do things and that I would be okay, that's what I'd go back. And it's weird that the researcher said this, but that's what I was. But I was 18, going through various changes and difficulties and, all the kind of things that were going on in our lives at that age. That's probably what I'd go back and say to myself.
Very reassuring. Very right. Definitely. Now, let's look right to the other end of the spectrum. What's the most exciting thing on your plate for the next few months?
I'm really pleased that I'll be going to do more work back in Henley Business School, fingers crossed. But I'll be working more on these kind of aspects of workers and workplaces. And I'm hopefully, fingers crossed and toes crossed, going to do more work on things around anti-work, Claire, anti-work.
Tell me about anti-work.
Yeah, I will. So I hopefully be doing a conference, and I've called it The End of Work as We Know It. So that's quite a dramatic title, but everyone should come. It's in April at Henley. I think what's happened when I left some of the jobs that I've done, I kind of like chatting to people to really kind of consider what was around. And some of the people I spoke to were having such a difficult time in their jobs that some people had left their jobs. Some people pushed, but then they said it was the best thing that happened. It was more than burnout. One person said, I had to leave my job, I thought I was going to die otherwise. And I thought it was just being dramatic because no, I'm serious. My doctor said it will. So then I just sort of pulling this thread about our approach to work. Now we've got artificial intelligence coming in and the threat of that, job displacement, job skills changing. We have to understand all these things, like diversity, all the jobs themselves change, the insecurity of work, cost of living, not to mention all the things that we see on news every day. So what I found is that more and more people are leaning against work. And the leaning against work, either not working. So in the UK, we've got a large number of people have not gone back into work since the pandemic. There's a large number of people poorly, but there's some people who are just thinking, no, this is not for me. So they're not going back into work. People are choosing side hustles that just to get through the day job and do something that's of interest. I spoke to the same company I did that talk to. They were saying that they're appalled, which just to briefly talk about Gen Z, younger generations saying, no, I'm not going to stay on till 5, 6 o'clock. I'm going to go home. I've got to go to the gym. I've got these things. And really feeling this challenge that people don't feel as loyal to the work and do all those things. I probably said that to my 18-year-old self as well. Don't work so much. Have another life as well. Your identity isn't your career. So it's just this thing around people perhaps seeing work differently. And when I was young and going through, as you said, about 18 and going through work, it was so important to progress, to move up, to show these qualities. And now I see people saying, yeah, but I also want a life. I want to be well. I want to feel good about things. And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at as well. So our people are perhaps having a different relationship with work.
That sounds interesting, exciting, and necessary. So I wish I could come, but I know I shan't be able to just because of geography. But that sounds like a wonderful prospect for any of us to be looking at participating in or contributing to or whatever. Naeema, it's been an absolute pleasure. As I usually say, with the best guests, we could probably go on for hours, but let's be kind to the listeners and leave them on that high note. Thank you very much.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Claire.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from this month's guest as much as we did.
Do go and check out our work on disrupt-your-career.com and come back soon. Thank you.